he had just moved there to Scarsdale because Silvio. It took 7 years for, I guess, the Patsy Eboli estate, who is Silvio's grandfather. When he disappeared in 1976, the assumption was that he was killed too, just like Tommy Eboli, his brother, was. But because there was no body, it took 7 years for the state to issue a death warrant or death certificate, and then all the money and stocks and everything were liquidated. And then they moved to Scarsdale. They had a fish store, and that's where I met them. And we've been pretty close friends ever since. And it was just kind of an interesting situation that popped in 2009, where our professional lives overlapped.
Right. It seems to me that like when Giuliani came into New York and became the mayor of New York, everyone was talking about how he was cracking down on organized crime. It didn't seem like he was cracking down on every family, and it seems like the Genovese kind of skated right through that. Right.
Well, I think you might be referring to when he was district attorney in the 80s. There's this mythology that Giuliani broke up the five families,
right?
And he did do a lot of damage. There's been a lot of theories about who got busted through Giuliani and who didn't, and a lot of people theorize that the ones that didn't get busted were really on Giuliani's team.
Right.
I don't have any definitive answer to that, but I will say this: that Silvio Eboli, the crime family. What you're as mayor of New York,
yeah,
Rudy Giuliani in 1994, they really stomped down street dealing. So you probably remember walking through Washington Square Park. I remember when I was a kid, I used to go there when I was 11 years old, and there'd be 10 people offering me anything I wanted, But when Rudy Giuliani became mayor, he cracked down on that, and what really emerged out of that was the home delivery business.
Right.
And Silvio was right there from the beginning. He was already kind of in the marijuana business, if you will, in New York prior to Giuliani. He started out at the bottom as a mule, and he would fly to Jamaica, and they would strap a few pounds to his legs, and then he would come back to JFK with them, and he would receive a certain cash stipend for each trip. And then as Giuliani moved in and the street dealing moved out, the home delivery business took over. And Silvio was right there when it started. And he biked around the city just like all the other messengers do. And people call in, they make an order, they send a bike messenger over to the apartment. He have a whole bunch of what they call the customers call them boxes. The business people behind the scenes call them tickets as a code, and they choose different strains of what they want. They usually would go for $50 a box, be a few grams in there. After 9/11, all the distribution systems of bulk bud in New York got fractured during 9/11, and that's when Silvio came in and slowly took over the downtown market. And since 9/11, Silvio has slowly encroached his way. He's moved into the Upper West Side, and he has a pretty large business going on on the streets of New York. But this is something that he's been doing for over 25 years, and it's something that just people kind of look at as easy money. It's not. Right. It's very hard work. There's a lot of detail that goes into it, especially if don't want to get caught. And he's very good at what he does. I guess it's an inherited talent.
Yeah, it is a unique talent. I got to admit that. Oh, what I was getting at, though, with Giuliani, it's just when he came in, he shut down a lot of strip clubs in New York City. And it seems like the ones that he left alone were the ones connected to Genovese. Just in my, I guess, offhand knowledge. Not that I would ever attend a strip club myself, but this is just the kind of thing that I would hear as I was passing by the library on my way to to study. You know what I'm saying? But that's just the kind of stuff that I heard back in those days. But who really knows? Now, how old is Silvio?
I believe he's 43, 44, something like that.
Oh, yes, he was a young guy. Okay, I'm 52. And how old are you?
I'm 45.
Okay, no, young guy too. Okay. All right, you're saying he was getting his pot from Jamaica most of the time?
Well, he was muling for somebody else.
Okay.
Up prior to 9/11, Silvio worked for others.
Okay.
And then after 9/11, he kind of became his own boss in the marijuana distribution business in New York. There were still people over him within his own family, and one of them actually had a very large operation on the Upper West Side. He ended up supplying his uncle all the bud for the Upper West Side, and then I guess when there was a situation between Uncle Frank, we can get into that later, as his name is, and Silvio, led to a tremendous big confrontation. And long story short, Silvio ended up taking over the Upper West Side as well from Uncle Frank.
Interesting.
And,
but now, where was it? Where does it get his pot from now? Mostly, isn't it now mostly like indoor grow operations?
Yeah, well, a lot of it comes from California. He actually gets his specifically from the gay mafia, which call themselves the Pink Hand, and their base of operation is in San Francisco. They have a gay porn distribution company, and the millions that they raise out of porn, I guess they want to diversify their portfolio. They got into the marijuana growing business. And they saw a need for cheaper bud, better quality bud on the East Coast,
right,
similar to what customers have on the West Coast. And they set up some kind of distribution channel. And Silvio was able to obtain wholesale bud from California through the gay mafia in New York.
What's he paying for it? Do you know?
I would guess somewhere between $8 to $10 a gram, but he resells it on the streets for $30.
Okay, but let's say he must be buying hundreds of pounds at a time. Let's say like 100 pounds. What would he be paying for 100 pounds?
I saw 100-pound sales.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would guess that's probably about right.
$8.50 a pound, $7.50 a pound. Do you know?
I don't remember. I mean, I don't know how much money was exchanged. Okay. I just saw money being exchanged.
No, another thing too, because now growing up and I grew up in Staten Island. I worked out of a PI's office in Brooklyn. We knew all those Colombo guys. I was involved in a lot of organized crime cases. I was involved in the Pizza Connection case and the commission trial as a private investigator. But now, my experience has always been, though, especially with the Genovese family too. That they didn't want guys selling pot or selling drugs or selling coke. Everyone kind of did it, but you would get in trouble if you got caught.
Well, I thought that actually was dealt with Vito Genovese and Lucky Luciano back in 1958. When Luciano was deported to Italy, he put Frank Costello in charge, and then I guess later when he had all else failed legally, he could not get back to the United States. He ended up putting Genovese and ended up pressuring Frank Costello out of Boss in 1957 and took over Genovese and was really what motivated Vito Genovese and Tommy Eboli, for that matter, who was directly under Vito Genovese when this kind of coup occurred, is that the dispute was about narcotics and selling narcotics. Lucky Luciano didn't want Genovese to get involved. Vito Genovese and Tommy Eboli did. And Patsy Eboli and Tommy Eboli flew to Sicily with a suitcase of cash to give to Lucky Luciano. And they explained to Lucky that Vito wanted to actually take Frank Costello out. And Lucky Luciano said, no, I'm shutting this down. I'm shutting down the idea, the concept that we're going to get involved in narcotics trafficking, and I'm shutting the idea that you're going to whack Costello. They flew back. They had both the brothers Eboli and Vito Genovese had a meeting. They decided that the drug business was too big for them not to get involved, and if they didn't get involved, that somebody else would and probably have more power than they would in the future. So they decided to whack Costello anyway. And so they sent one of Tommy's old boxers, Vincent Gigotti, right, who waited in the hotel lobby. Tommy dropped him off in a black Cadillac. They waited in the lobby for Frank to come in. Vincent took a shot at Frank. He hit him in the head and ran off, and he survived. It just grazed him. But it rattled Frank so much that he actually decided he was going to resign. And there was a really unique meeting in upstate New York that year where hundreds of mobsters from all over the country, Canada, Italy, all diverged on this small little town in upstate New York. And they, Frank Costello handed power over to Vito Genovese. And then Vito Genovese handed power over to Tommy Eboli as his underboss. And that's how Genovese carried on after that. But what happened after that is that Lucky Luciano set Vito Genovese up. He ended up in jail probably a year later or two. And that's when Tommy took over Genovese. And then Vito Genovese died in jail. And then Tommy was involved in major narcotics trafficking while he was a boss. He actually borrowed money from what was the commission, which was heads of all the 5 families. He borrowed $4 million to set the Eboli family up in the heroin business. And they got busted really quick. And the Eboli family believes that the commission set them up. The police gave the commission back the money, put Tommy even more hot water because he owed all these millions to the other families. So I think that drugs and narcotics in the Genovese crime family is kind of post, I guess, after 57 was pretty par of the course.
You know, it's interesting because you talk about when Vincent, the boxer, Vincent Gigante, went into the Sheraton Hotel, into the barbershop of the Sheraton Hotel and shot that guy. I used to get a shave in it. I used to go to that hotel. I used to go to that barbershop in that hotel all the time and get a manicure and a shave. That's where we used to go back in the 80s to get a shave and manicure. But now Vincent Gigante, he's the one now. Now, is he still alive today, Vincent the Chin Gigante?
No, he died. He was known originally as the Chin because he was a boxer. He had a pretty tough face. But later he became known as the Odd Father because he used to pretend to act insane, and he would stagger around the downtown New York in a bathrobe with a couple of bodyguards, and he'd be all disheveled and have a 24-hour shadow, and he'd talk to himself and mumble, and then he'd go inside and he would go up, he'd get in a limo, go handle business, go see his wife and kids, come back down. He had a special studio apartment he lived in the Village, and then he would start acting insane again. It was a very strange operation, to say the least.
Yeah. And he actually had a brother or a cousin or something that was a Catholic, almost like a bishop or something. He had a big shot.
Yeah. He was a big guy in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
I tell you, this stuff, if it wasn't all true, no one would believe it.
Sometimes it is. It's better than fiction.
Yeah. Okay, but see, because I know guys that used to hang out down in that club there, where Vincent Gigante, was running things still. And I got to tell you, man, this was back in the 80s and 90s, and those guys were not allowed to sell any kind of pot or anything like that whatsoever, or any kind of drugs. They would, the guys who hung out there would get in trouble. I know for a fact they would. As a matter of fact, I used to hear these guys too say that they would hope that their own uncles and their own fathers, this is guys of my age at the time, 29, 30 years old back in the 80s and the 90s, would hope that their own uncles and their own fathers would either get killed or get thrown in prison so that they could go out on the street and sell drugs.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the Odd Father banned it.
Yeah.
But the Eboli crime family really separated for them once Tommy was whacked by the Odd Father. So whatever the Ebolis were doing post Tommy Eboli's death was really on their own, Yeah. And they moved into they had a piece of Fulton Fish Market, so they opened up cash-only fish stores in Westchester, and they got into the bagel business in Florida. But they really kind of laid low from Genovese. Patsy Eboli was worried that he too was going to get killed by Vincent, and
I think everybody who ever met him or had any kind of brush with was worried at one point or another,
Patsy did actually. There was a hit out on Patsy by Vincent, so he disappeared in 1976, and the police, nobody could figure out what happened. The assumption was, as Tommy Eboli was murdered in public, public square right there on the streets for everyone to see, that maybe they decided to bury Patsy somewhere, and they found his car at JFK, and I think the theory was that was designed just to muddy the waters. But what actually